Hey everyone, Tim here with a supplemental video for you to take the place of the little issue we had Saturday in the Subject to workshop, 8 August. And I could have just given you the updated PowerPoint slides, but I wanted to talk to this because I know this is critical to everyone when putting together Subject to kind of deals. So what I'm going to do is go through here and I'm going to show you several different ways that you can structure a sub 2 deal. And the real benefit would have been if we would have had some current deals from the students to use real numbers, real situations, and show you just how to look at those things. So we'll go ahead and get started here, and hopefully this is going to help you a lot and eliminate the confusion that I created with you by having my slides wrong. So the first scenario is subject to the underlying first mortgage balance and in a low to no equity kind of deal. So what I mean by that is that, let's say the house is 200,000 and they owe 190. That's a low to no equity kind of deal. So you can take over those kind of deals like we talked about, using options, giving yourself plenty of option period. And this is a scenario where the seller is due no equity because there's nothing in the house to give, okay? And the buyer will begin making payments beginning 30 days after closing. So, by the way, backing up here, when we say low to no equity, we're talking about of any kind of significance that you can give the seller. Now, what do you want to give them? I mean, what do you consider low equity? Many times, wholesalers, they want a 30% discount minus the repairs or more for those that are really greedy nowadays, or the ones that don't really know what they're doing. But in sub 2 deals, there's nothing saying you couldn't do that deal at 15 or 20%, or even less if you structure it where you have no risk, or if you happen to have a humongous buyers list that's looking for that kind of deal. So, it's up to you and your business model. Do you want a 10% discount? Do you want 20? Do you want 30? Again, if you're leveraging other people's money, and if you don't have to close on it till you find the buyer who has a big chunk down for down payment, it's really similar to doing wholesale deals. So you need to think about that. And again, find a person that's like-minded that you can joint venture with, whether that's me or somebody else. Find somebody that you can trust, that's like-minded and has the knowledge and experience to help you through these kind of situations. So, moving on here. In this case, the payments are current and the seller gets debt relief. That's the benefit to the seller in this scenario. And to you, the payments are current. The seller gets debt relief instantly when you close on this house. Okay? The second scenario is subject to the underlying first mortgage, including all arrearages and any kind of forbearance amounts and the payments in arrears. Okay? So that's what this is. This is a payments in arrears kind of deal. So you've got arrearages, you got forbearance amounts, and I haven't had a lot of experience with the forbearance, so you have to go pursue that. Make sure it's on the property information sheet, which I updated, so the one I provided in the class has that question on it to help you remember it, and you need to go get that agreement and find out what the terms of that are and what the total amount is, because in this scenario, and I believe you're going to find plenty of them given the circumstances right now with COVID-19, and all the forbearances that have been issued. So keep that in mind when you're talking to sellers. No equities due seller. They're in arrears. Okay. So now that doesn't mean somebody in arrears couldn't have equity in the house, but that's another scenario. This is one scenario that has no equity due seller. So you could easily put, equity due and have a second note for that equity. Buyer to bring payments current immediately after closing. So you notice up here, 30 days after closing. Why is that? Because your mortgage payment, your interest, is paid in arrears, which means you live in the house first, then you pay the payment. Unlike rent, where you pay first and then you live in it. So that means that when you pay the 1 September mortgage payment, you're paying the principal and interest for the month of August. So up here, whenever you can, if the seller is still in possession of that house, you don't want to take over until the next month. And that's what that's really saying. 30 days after closing. Okay. The next one is, or on this scenario here, buyer to bring payments current immediately. Well, this one's in arrears. So you do not want to let it continue. But timing's important. You do not want to pay until you have title. So in other words, you got to go to closing and have the title company pay off those arrearages and bring the payment current at that point. Whether it's scheduled for the auction yet or not, you need to get that paid before or immediately after closing to stop the foreclosure. And that's exactly what this is doing, is it's preventing that foreclosure from happening. Okay. Next scenario, subject to the underlying first mortgage, low to no equity deal. Okay. So in this case, in this scenario, your seller is paying you a set number of payments beginning on a certain date, whatever that you've agreed to. And this would be, in my opinion, would be for a good credit seller only, meaning they've got excellent credit, so they're going to want to protect their credit. I would be thinking twice about trying to take payments from somebody that has bad credit. Okay, so again, you negotiate how many payments you feel you need to make up for the fact that it's low to no equity and the date that they're going to start, and the agreement in the note, and then make sure that they pay those payments. Okay, again, this is for a good credit seller only with good credit score. Buyer begins making payments 30 days after closing. Again, you're paying in arrears, so you want to make sure that the payment is paid for this month by the seller. You take over the following month. Again, it's a low to no equity kind of deal. Next one is subject to the underlying first. Again, a low to no equity deal with nothing down. Okay. Your seller pays you a fixed amount of cash to you to take over the mortgage. So this goes really towards the people that have bad credit, or it could be good credit if they're willing to pay the cash. Okay, so again, low to no equity deal, so the seller gets nothing. The seller is going to pay you so much cash for you to take over the mortgage. And again, that's because there's no equity in it. Okay, and I would say this should really be for that bad credit type seller, so that you can be sure that he's not going to default and walk away, not tell you. You don't want him to tell you he'll pay you those payments and then him not. Okay, so that's the reason why you switch to cash instead of payments in the previous scenario. Another low to no equity deal. Notice that I'm showing you a lot of low to no equity deals here because you're going to come across plenty of these. And I know there were some questions about this in the class. So again, seller gets nothing down because there's no equity to speak of. Your seller pays a second mortgage for a fixed number of months. So if there's a second on it, then he agrees to pay so many number of payments, and this would be for a good credit seller. Okay? Again, I would not be doing this, or I'd be thinking twice about trying to collect payments, not cash, payments, because if they were a bad credit seller, they don't care about their credit. Okay? A good credit buyer or good credit seller is going to be concerned about making the payment on time to not impact credit. Buyer begins making the first mortgage payment 30 days after closing. In this scenario, you're making the first payments, they're making the second payments. Low to no equity deal. Again, that's what this is. Okay? Here's a underlying first with equity. Okay? So the seller's going to get some money, some down, something of their equity. I didn't say all. All is another scenario, but in this case, some money down. Your seller carries a note for the balance with a balloon payment due on such and such date. So let's say you took over the first and they had $50,000 in equity, and you're going to give them 20 or 10, and they're going to carry a note for 40. So your seller's going to carry that note for the balance with a balloon payment due on such and such date. This is important that you pay attention to this balloon payment date, because you don't want to be owing $40,000 and there's not enough equity in the deal. Or, if there was a huge spread in this house, you could probably get private money or even a conventional loan to pay this equity. But many times what I would suggest is, either if you don't have the cash yet, is find a private lender, private money partner that'll cover that balloon payment, or just have this far enough out into the future that you've already sold the house, maybe on refinance or just retail, and then you can pay it off at that point. By the way, when you have a balloon payment, let's say it's out 5 years out, and you retail the house in 3 years, you'll have to pay off that note at the time of closing. Buyer to take over first mortgage payments 30 days after closing with no payment due on the seller note. Okay? So again, this is related to this. Seller carries a note for the balance. I'm saying no payment due to this on that seller note right here. Okay? So sometimes you can negotiate that like that. Sometimes you can't. It depends on your seller, what kind of money they need when they're moving, and whether or not you can convince them to do that. Okay? So, but this is a scenario that you could possibly negotiate. And it's something for you to think about when you are structuring these deals. When you're all done with these particular slides here today, I hope you see that, there's all kinds of different scenarios. I hope it gets your mind thinking about, ideas on how to structure these sub-2 deals. Another one with equity. In this one, they get nothing down. The last one, they got some down. This one, they get nothing down. The seller carries a note for the balance for some agreed to period of time with a monthly payment. So in this case, it's not a no payment no monthly payment deal like the last one. This one has a payment for some period of time that you both agree to. That would go into the note. Okay. You might try asking for a fixed number of principal payments for so many months, meaning, as an example here, $400 a month for 24 months. Notice there's nothing there about interest rates. Will people do this? Yes. But just keep this in mind that some people want a quick pay down. So this is a way to do that. And it's also very helpful to you when you can pay off a note like this if it doesn't have interest in it. So keep that in mind. This is another payment scenario. So try negotiating 400 payments a month. I'm sorry, $400 a month for 24 months. Naturally, these numbers have to work for your deal. So you got to do the math, figure out if based on what your monthly underlying principal and interest payment is, plus this fee of $400 a month, this payment of $400 a month taken from either your owner finance wrap note or your rental income. That's you got to make sure you do the math, make sure it works for you. Borrower to take over first mortgage payment 30 days after closing. Pretty standard. Now, another scenario that I did not put in here, but you could easily change this 30 days, especially on a low equity deal. Change it to 60 days, change it to 90 days. Again, it's another payment scenario that you could work into your offers based on what you hear from the seller. Okay. Borrower to begin payment of the second lien payment to the seller on such and such date. So if you owe them equity, you got this seller's note here, okay? You can also negotiate when you're going to start making that payment, what date. And this is an important one to remember because you may be having to rehab the house first. You may need to rehab it and then rent it or owner finance it to get cash flow coming in before you want to start making that payment. So that's the reason why this is important here to be thinking about this. Making that, when do you want to start? When does your cash flow begin on this house and you want to start making that payment to the seller? Okay. And then the last one is subject to the underlying first and second mortgage, along with any combination of the above scenarios. So these I didn't really address much with a second mortgage up here. So you could do sub 2 for the first and second mortgage, along with any of these other scenarios. So hopefully that gives you something to think about. And hopefully you will be able to work through some of these on your own, maybe write them down, practice them, maybe write out some other variations of these, because there's a number of other things you could do. I just gave you some of the pretty straightforward, simple things that you should think about, and hopefully that's going to help you. So, see you soon.